One of the single most impactful theatrical experiences you will have in a theater all year. I'm going to tell you why you should go and watch All Quiet on the Western Front, even if you wait for it to come on Netflix in a few weeks. What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. This is a Netflix-backed German film that I was very excited about, a remake of a movie that is based off of a novel, a story that has been told countless times. All Quiet on the Western Front had me salivating based off the trailer alone. Here is the storyline. So we follow teenagers Paul and his friends Albert and Muller, who voluntarily enlist in the German army, riding a wave of patriotic fever that quickly dissipates once they face the brutal realities of life on the front. Paul's preconceptions about the enemy and the rights and wrongs of conflict soon crumble. However, Paul must carry on fighting until the end with no purpose other than to satisfy the top brass's desire to end the war on a German offensive. Like I said, this is a movie that's going to impact you in numerous ways, especially with this rating, rated R, for strong, bloody war violence and grisly images. And that rating is about as accurate as they come. This is one of the most brutal and intense experiences I've had in the movie theater in years, and I genuinely mean that. And I saw Terrifier 2 a couple of weeks ago, but that's a very different type of movie, obviously that being fictionalized. This is a true feeling war story that, like I said, has been told numerous times based off of the novel way back in the early 1900s. And of course, the movie, I believe it was like 1930, that won Best Picture. Now, I have not seen that film. I believe there is another one in the late 1970s. Haven't seen that film. So we're already off to not the hottest start here, because I had no point of reference as to what this movie would be other than to draw comparisons to the obvious recent film in 1917. I saw the trailer. I said, ooh, that has the same vibe and aesthetic. But in reality, they're very different films, right? We're dealing with the war in both in the same time period down to the same year at a point in All Quiet on the Western Front. But this time around, we're getting a look at the German soldiers, telling this from a completely different perspective than what we're used to. Now, all of the similarities that we know from other war movies are there in a way, right? We start with a young group of guys who don't necessarily know why they want to be in the war other than to be a hero, to prove someone wrong, to do it because they know they found their calling. The scenes within the first 20 minutes involve our protagonist listening to these speeches, getting all rallied up, falsifying a signature just to make sure they have a spot, being so excited that they found their place in life. And, I mean, it's obvious, but you get the subtle hint of, oh, this is obviously not going to be what they anticipate. I mean, one of the first scenes in the movie is one of our main characters is accepting his uniform, and you can tell that it's a uniform that has been patched up. It's a uniform that has been worn by someone who did not make it out. And there are millions of people that did not make it out of this specific battle, moving the trenches, right? That's what they say throughout the entire movie. But when you look back at what actually happened within this battle, well, they didn't move them very far. So I heard this a lot going into the film. It's essentially a war movie that is also an anti-war movie, showing you all of the things wrong with war, the excitement and anticipation by these young men, and then immediately realizing this is not what we thought it would be. It's actually about 1,000 times worse. Now, movies, they can say that all day long, but how do you convey that on screen? How do you show us the brutality of war, but also the impact of it emotionally on these young men, to where even when they realize that they have a chance to make it out, even when there is a glimmer of hope for every individual in this film, it always feels like the world is crashing down regardless, because you've been there and you've seen things and you've done it, and you realize that this is not something that you're easily going to be able to recover from. Now, I have a lot of family members that have been in the war, those that fought in Vietnam War growing up, right? I knew people that fought in World War II and have been a part of this madness. But World War I, right, it feels like a different beast in its entirety. Not to play the comparison game, but this specific instance and the battle that we see being fought, and just knowing the outcome of World War I as a whole and how many people died, and it feels like needlessly died because of some of the decisions being made up top by people that are sitting in the comfort of their own schmoozy room with the fireplace going and the food on the table and everything seems so fine and dandy, but at the same time they're pushing all of these young men out to go and do what feels unthinkable and unspeakable, but these are actions that we see play out in this movie. Now I'll get into the visuals and just, how this movie is impactful through all those things here in a second, but just talking about the concept of this film as a whole, that's something I had to process and understand as I was going, right? This is a movie that points out all of the things that are bad about war. I love all of the individuals that go out and fight for us every single day, but just the concept as a whole, looking at World War I specifically, it's sad. And this movie conveys that, right? That's why I'm going through this entire spiel. This movie does such a wonderful job of showing you, not necessarily telling you in an exposition-filled way. I think some people may take issue with the main character of Paul, the fact that he is just, not the most dynamic or well-rounded character I've ever seen. The performance is incredible, by the way. The cast as a whole, you have recognizable faces in there, like Daniel Bruhl, but for the most part, just individuals fitting into their roles perfectly, and the group that Paul surrounds himself with, and seeing everything that happens to his friends and the people that have his back, the journey that he goes on. I didn't mind not knowing as much about him with his past. I like approaching these war movies as a day-in-the-life type of thing. People critique 1917. Well, we didn't get a lot about their backstory and whatnot. That's not what the movie's all about. Why do we need that? It makes no sense to waste time on that. They give us enough through conversations and certain instances of dialogue, and I felt the same way about the lead character in this movie. I thought he was handled well. Again, not the most fleshed out character I've ever seen, but I didn't see it as a huge criticism because of what the movie is all about, and that is the war itself. So let's talk about that war. Let's talk about what these characters have to actually go through. Visually, the cinematography, the color correction, all that, the fancy schmoozy, Austin's using the weird big words again that he learned in college. Yeah, because it's one of the best looking movies I've seen all year. It's one of the best looking movies I've seen in 3 to 4 years. It's an incredible, visceral, visual experience, and it has a purpose. And that purpose is to show us all of these atrocities that took place, and to show it in the most, oddly enough, juxtaposing that point, a beautiful way. It's a beautiful movie showcasing terrible and ugly events. That's exactly what it needed to be. And I mean, down to the most intricate detail, this film is beautiful. It's also epic. There are certain moments where the CGI is kind of obvious, people being burned, lit on fire. Yeah, that's definitely a CGI fire, but these moments never took me out of the film. But there are also beautiful instances of CGI mixed with practical effects and moments that they make grand. There's one moment, right? Our troops are fighting and they're in the midst of battle, and then everything stops. It seems to slow down and something is coming. You can feel the rumbling. You can feel the air get a little bit thicker, and then you see down the horizon. These things are World War I opposing army tanks. Now, how many times have we seen a tank in a movie? Countless times. But this moment, this scene, the way it is conveyed, those tanks are terrifying. I'm watching this scene going, what? How do you make something I've seen 1,000 times in a movie? And even when we see it on screen, I'm like, oh yeah, it just looks like a tank, but the way that they film it and the way that they make the scene, start out so incredibly breathtaking. The score comes in, and I did think the score was overbearing in moments, but as we went, I'm looking at it going, no, it's supposed to make you feel that way, and I really appreciated it more as we progressed, and at the end, I was like, that's a beautiful score, beautiful sound design. And that's why I think watching this in the theater was a pretty big deal. It's going to come out on Netflix, and you can do the sub or the dub. I watched it with subtitles. I like getting those actual performances, and the performances were exactly what they needed to be. I mean, down to the last bit of emotions that gave me chills, and the final few moments of the film, everyone's just sitting there as the credits play. Nobody's saying a word. That's exactly what you want from this experience. But speaking on that experience, watching it on Netflix, I don't know if it's going to do it justice. I don't know if it's going to be what it was for me seeing it in a big theater in New York. Who cares that it was in New York? Just see it on a nice theater with some big speakers, and that's going to make a huge difference because it's an experience. I had an experience very similar when I watched 1917. Now, that's the one-take shtick. This doesn't have that, but the cinematography is still excellent, and there are scenes that are stuck in my brain and scenes that I want to quit thinking about because of how impactful they actually are. And it's a movie that makes you sad, it makes you emotional while you're watching, but I can't stop thinking about it due to the filmmaking, due to how it looked and how it made me feel. And our director here, Edward Berger, adapting this movie and bringing it to life in the way that he did is just oh so impressive. It is Germany's official entry into the Oscars, and yes, it's going to get an international nomination for sure. I hope it gets a Best Picture nomination. It is easily one of the best experiences of the year. I don't know if everyone's going to love the jumping back and forth throughout the film. The fact that it's 2 hours and 30 minutes, I didn't necessarily feel the runtime, but we go from people fighting in a war to those sitting in a room, generals discussing what the future moves have to be. I liked the fact that those two story points clashed in such a way to where you see the perspectives of those in the war, of those not actually on the ground fighting, so I didn't mind the jumping around, if you want to call it that, but I thought it was well edited together. There are also some scenes to where it slows down and you start to get conversations between Paul and his brothers, and some of those scenes, they do tend to drag as the movie goes, but looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, I guess those scenes were integral because you learn more about our characters, and you learn to love what we have in this movie as it goes. I could go on all day about this film, but I have to give you a number. I have to give you a rating before I do that. If you're here and you enjoy this review, stay tuned. We're going to be talking Oscars on this channel. All the movies I saw at the New York Film Festival and Black Adam later today, so you don't want to miss that. And if you enjoy this review and you want to drop that like, that would be awesome. It would really help this video. All Quiet on the Western Front brings us a masterful look at the brutality of war. It is a difficult film to watch, but it's presented in the most visually stunning way. From cinematography to editing, this is a pure filmmaking showcase, a truly unforgettable experience. And one word here, wow. My score is a 96%. And I'm a little biased. I love a good war film when it can show us the brutality of what war actually is. This may just be the definition of that, and that's why it works so well for me. But what an experience. I sat there for about 10 minutes after the movie ended. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know, are you seeing this film soon? And I'll see you guys later today.